Hello, hello. I don't know if you can hear me yet, but I am here. Hi, Steve. Hi, Dale. Hi, Dolores. I'll be right in. I hope you can hear me now.
I hope you can hear.
Yes, I think you can hear me now. Okay, Steve says we see and hear you. Hi, Evelina. That's great. Steve Wolfbrandt and Steve DeVore are both here. Thank you. Now, all we need is Steve Gonzo to make things complete. Okay, I'm just going to jump in because I'm a little late here tonight, and there are a lot of things to cover. I'm sure you have heard a lot of the news today. I want to go over some of the news that I think is the most important news. Uh, in relation to the title, the virus, the economy, and Congress. Then perhaps we can talk about the presidential race as well. Stacy Van Veen is joined. Hey, Stacy, how are you? Okay, so uh, there are 51 Republican senators who just voted against expanding paid sick leave to all workers. If one of these Republicans or two is your senator, call their office right now and tell them you saw their vote and you won't forget. That's a message from I don't know if it, from Jake Johnson. Anyway, Jake Johnson in Common Dreams was writing about it. Uh, anyway, they teamed up to kill an amendment introduced by Patty Murray, who's a Democratic senator from Washington, would have expanded paid sick leave to millions of U.S. workers left out of a bipartisan coronavirus relief package. That's the House measure that was voted in just recently, and that then was passed on to the Senate. Every Republican president for the vote, 51 in total, 51 of the 54 Republicans, voted against the amendment, while every Senate Democrat voted in favor. Senators Cory Gardner, Colorado, and Rick Scott, a Republican of Florida, were the only senators who did not vote on the amendment. Incidentally, Cory Gardner is behind by 51 to 38 in his reelection attempt in Colorado, which is probably why he did not vote for the amendment. It would have guaranteed 2 piddling weeks of paid sick leave, as well as 12 weeks of paid family leave and also medical leave to all U.S. employees and independent contractors. Uh, and the progressive group Indivisible said 51 Republican senators just voted against an amendment that would have expanded paid leave to millions of Americans that were left out of the package. They tweeted this and then said, quote, let that sink in, unquote. And the group added, call their office right now and tell them you saw their vote and won't forget they voted against the Murray Amendment to expand paid leave to millions of Americans. And that's it. If you're in one of their states, get the hell on the phone and call them and tell them you're going to remember this and that you are not going to vote for them the next time that they're up for election. In particular, you should give that one to Susan Collins of Maine, up for re-election right now. John Cornyn, who I believe is up for re-election in Texas right now. Martha McSally, okay, of Arizona, who's up for re-election right now. Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, and there goes my camera once again. Sorry. Oops, let's see if it goes back on. Hang on a second, folks. It jumped off there for a minute. It's on again now. That should be it. I hope everybody can still hear me. Kesa has been watching the virus info on CNN. What a damn mess. Yeah. It's a criminal mess, folks. It's a criminal mess. Somebody should be impeached right now because it is a criminal mess. Okay, you're now seeing on Facebook a delay while I reconnect my camera. Here I am, though. There it is. We have a liar as a president. Is this news? Is this news? The news of the evening. We have a liar as a president, Steve DeVore says. Stacy says evening. And Dale says, yep, you're good. And Evelina says, shameless. It's all a game to them. Okay, I guess. Yeah, it's all a game to them until some of them start to die. For some reason, I've lost the camera I was using, which was my Logitech, the Logitech camera. Its software was turned off, and instead, suddenly, I have ChromaCam on there, and I have no interest in having a ChromaCam on there. So I'm going to check my settings and try to get it off there. And here I am again, and I have the right settings now, so that should be all right. Sorry for the technical mess ups tonight. Stacy says, I can see you. Yes. Thank you, Stacy. Okay, so I wanted to call attention to that little bit of business and to all the Republicans who voted against sick leave for Americans being forced to work and endanger their lives in this crisis. Of course, 2 weeks of sick leave is absolutely nonsense. It should be a lot more than 2 weeks, of sick leave. The full relief package, formerly known as the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, easily passed the Senate on Wednesday afternoon by a vote of 90-8, and Trump subsequently signed the measure into law. Progressive criticized the law because it only provides paid sick leave to about 20% of the U.S. Patty Murray pitched her amendment as a common sense step that would be good both for workers and for small businesses. And that's what we get. Yeah, I know. There's a problem. There it is. Should be showing up on your screen any minute now. Right. So the amendment was a modified version of the Paid Leave Act which Murray introduced on Tuesday alongside Senator Gillibrand and Representative Dr. Lauro of Connecticut. It's the right thing to do for our economy and for public health, and we should get it done as soon as possible, Patty Murray said. If we don't do this, if we let this opportunity slip by, we're sending a message to scared people across the country that we still are not willing to acknowledge the scope of the tragedy we are seeing unfold. Truer words were never spoken. Why is that the case? Well, we'll be getting to why as we go through various items. First, let's note, a nice piece by Norman Solomon that appeared in Readers-Supported News. And basically that piece was making the point that the difference between Biden and Sanders is that Biden merely wants to patch up some of the holes in the present system. But we have the absence of a public health system, and Biden wants to patch up some of the holes, while Sanders wants to build up a strong structure on truly democratic foundations. And you remember what Bernie said in the debate against Joe Biden last Sunday. He said, quote, "It is time to ask how we got to where we are, not only our lack of preparation for the virus, but how we end up with an economy where so many people are hurting at a time of massive income and wealth inequality." And then Bernie said, "It is time to ask the question of where the power is in America. Who owns the media? Who owns the economy? Who owns the legislative process? Why do we give tax breaks to billionaires and raise and not raise the minimum wage?" And Solomon points out, while so-called moderate Democrats, quote unquote, like Biden, don't want to answer even hear such questions, Sanders insists on continuing to ask them. Such perseverance has never been more needed than at this particular moment, with so many lives in the balance. Where the power is in America is everything to do with why the U.S. government's response to the unfolding coronavirus catastrophe has continued to be so anemic, foreshadowing so many more deaths and so much more grief. And Solomon says it's urgent to implement all-out measures to contain the coronavirus spread, seriously aiming for containment rather than merely flattening the curve. Meanwhile, policies are needed to make sure that insurance industry profiteers and other sectors of corporate America don't get away with rapaciously benefiting from catastrophe in ways that would cause enormous misery for vast numbers of people. A pair of campaign documents released this week: the Biden plan to combat the coronavirus, COVID-19, and prepare for future global health threats, and the Sanders emergency response to the coronavirus pandemic that we went over here a couple of days ago, convey big differences in their approach to the current unprecedented crisis. What Biden's proposing to do is to tweak a healthcare system, and aid only some who suffer economic distress. In sharp contrast, Bernie is proposing the far-reaching measures that include free healthcare for all, a Medicare for All bill, of course. It will ensure that everyone in America, regardless of existing coverage, can receive the health care they need during this crisis, and major financial assistance to all, specifically emergency $2,000 cash payments to every person in America every month for the duration of the crisis. And Bernie, of course, called for a program that would spend at least $2 trillion in response to the emergency. He laid out commensurate programs to mobilize on a scale not seen since the New Deal in World War II to prevent deaths, job losses, and economic ruin. And that's a quote from Bernie. Joe Biden versus Bernie Sanders is not only an electoral contest between presidential candidates, it's also a contrast of patchwork fixes versus profound structural changes, refusal to upset the apple carts of corporate power versus willingness to fight that power, teepid adjustments versus truly transformational agendas. Sanders was correct when he said that last week. Poll after poll, excluding the exit polls, show that a strong majority of the American people support our progressive agenda. Days ago, the Bernie 2020 campaign sent out a mass email declaring that our campaign has won the battle of ideas, quote unquote. Whether the ideas that Sanders is championing can appreciably shape the government's response to the coronavirus will have a lot to do with how successful the United States can be in limiting its terrible effects. I thought that was a very correct characterization of the differences in the programs of the two men, and one that voters should take seriously into account. And now, in the midst of all this, there is Nancy Pelosi, and an article in The Intercept, which was by Akilah Lacey. While top Democrats waffle, GOP rolls out plans for coronavirus cash handouts. Is Pelosi leading from behind? Well, the answer to that question, of course, is way behind. And the article points out Republicans are outmaneuvering Democratic Party leaders with their plans to put cash directly into the pockets of working Americans in response to the coronavirus. As Washington scrambles to put together an economic relief package, President Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have been dubbed Washington's crisis negotiation team. So Nancy Pelosi decided to negotiate and compromise with the Treasury Secretary and Donald Trump. But while Republicans and Democrats have swiftly put forth plans to immediately give Americans extra cash, Pelosi and the Democratic leaders have moved more slowly, saying that they want to ensure payments benefit Americans most in need, rather than indiscriminately giving out cash. This is, of course, the stupidest thing. The reason why it's the stupidest thing is because you can specify in the bill, cash payments will be sent to everyone, but everyone making over $75,000 a year or $100,000 a year, or whatever number you want to put in there, is not entitled to the cash benefit. So the cash benefit will be recouped as taxation, will be recouped as taxes by the IRS at the end of the year. You'll have to add the amount of the cash you were given to your taxes at the end of the year, and you'll be responsible. You'll be responsible in your estimation of taxes for the money you're getting. You're getting this money because we don't have time to go through the process of having people apply. They need cash now. So we're sending them that cash. We have no way of deciding prematurely that you're not entitled to that cash. So we're going to tax you later. That's how we're going to handle it. So we're going to have checks or electronic transfers in process by April 1st. By April 1st. Of course, that's what Nancy Pelosi should have said or should be saying, but Trump says he wants to send checks to Americans beginning on April 6th, which happens to be my brother's birthday, by the way, and again on May 18th, Vice reported on Wednesday. Documents from the Treasury Department lay out a plan to disperse a total of $250 billion to taxpayers in 2 rounds of direct cash payments. That's probably not enough. Probably need more like $750 billion to $1 trillion in payments to taxpayers. On Monday, though, the Minority Leader Chuck Schumer criticized the Republicans, or their calls, I should say, to issue immediate $1,000 checks to people in response to the virus. He said, this is not a time for small thinking. A single $1,000 check would help someone pay their landlord in March. What happens after that, he added? $1,000 goes by pretty quickly if you're unemployed. Yes, but why not the $1,000? Give them the $1,000 and then also give them what you say you want. And Schumer said what he wanted. He wants to expand unemployment insurance to help people for a longer period of time and provide a bigger safety net. Chuck, what's wrong with doing both? If we're going to provide direct payments, they need to be bigger, more frequent, more targeted. The millionaires should not get them. Chuck, take it back from the billionaires, 100%. That way, they will not get them in the longer run. In the meantime, you can't be fooling around about this. You have to get the cash out there to people. Idiot. Political malpracticer. And who's the malpracticer in chief? It is House Democratic leader, Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who opposed proposals to send immediate cash payments because she didn't want them to go to rich people. Quote, which is a strange opposition to it because rich people don't want $1,000, unquote, said one House Democratic staffer who asked for anonymity. Quote, Democrats treated this pandemic like it was any other legislative business, the staffer said. There's a lack of leadership, unquote. On Wednesday evening, there sure is, but why should we be surprised? We've been lacking leadership from these two since Pelosi got back into the speakership and before. We haven't had any leadership from them for a long time. They are leaders that their caucuses should immediately be gotten rid of for fear that there will be both a Republican House and a Republican Senate in 2021. These people are going to cause you folks to lose. It's obvious. If Trump can outleft you, you're gone. On Wednesday evening, the Senate passed an emergency relief package, including free coronavirus testing, paid sick leave, and unemployment benefits. The Senate is working on another plan to pass additional measures to send immediate cash to families. Pelosi's deputy chief of staff, Drew Hamill, tweeted that the speaker believed that Congress should look into refundable tax credits, expanded universal income, and direct payments, but wanted to ensure those relief plans were targeted to communities that need it the most. Do that by targeting the taxes, Nancy. Target the taxes, not the spending right now. Some progressive questioned the messaging. If we agreed that the crisis is stark and immediate, and we know that precise targeting takes time and administrative effort, why make that a requirement when you can simply disperse the funds now and collect them from high-income recipients at a later time? And New York Times columnist Jamel Bowie wrote that on Twitter. Senator Mitt Romney and Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton put out proposals for payouts that were to the left of what the Democrats in the House are doing right now. And pundits say that the Democratic leadership is squandering their best chance in recent memory to truly lead on the issues most important to their base. Unfortunately, their base isn't really the people who vote for them, it's the donors who fund their campaigns. That's why they're not acting quickly, because they're afraid the donors will charge them with fiscal irresponsibility. There were a few who worried Trump and the Republicans wouldn't get behind the idea, particularly after having to walk back the original plans for paid family and sick leave. And the staffer said, I think all of that happened because Romney came out the day before, and now Democrats look way behind. They certainly do look way behind. I hope they'll catch up. Maybe calls to your senators and congressmen will get them to catch up. Romney proposed a one-time $1,000 check. Cotton wanted to add $1,000 to monthly paychecks for people in low and middle income brackets, up to $4,000 a month for a family of four. Cotton rolled out an official plan on Tuesday to immediately send 1,000 checks to every person making under $100,000. So that's his red line, $100,000. Senator Kamala Harris on Tuesday played small ball, I added that, and proposed giving Americans up to $500 a month. That's the same amount she proposed adding to Americans' pockets with a 2018 tax credit plan. Seems like she's hung up on $500 a month, even though in 2018 there was no sign of the coronavirus and no sign of the economic problems we're immediately having now. 70,000 people filed for unemployment last week. People are predicting this week 130,000 people are going to file, for unemployment. That means pretty soon we're going to be losing 500,000 jobs a month. Much sooner than we think. Sherrod Brown, Senator of Ohio, and Cory Booker of New Jersey sent a letter on Tuesday to the majority and minority leaders, Mitch McConnell and Schumer, respectively, calling for immediate payments of $2,000 to adults and children and families making under $90,000 per individual and $180,000 per couple, with subsequent payments decreasing over time. That letter was also signed by Democratic Senators Chris Murphy of Connecticut, Brian Schatz of Hawaii, Michael Bennet, of Colorado, and Independent Senator Angus King, that's including Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, and Joe Kennedy of Massachusetts, also running for the Senate, have put forward promising plans. So where was Ed Markey? Why wasn't he putting forward something? On Friday, Democratic Representatives Ro Khanna of California, Tim Ryan of Ohio, proposed an emergency earned income tax credit in the form of checks of up to $6,000 for Americans who made under $65,000 by last year. Why not an omnibus bill passing all of these things and Bernie's $2,000 a month emergency basic income for the period of the duration of the coronavirus. More than 3/4 of American workers would qualify for the package that was proposed by Ro Khanna and by Tim Ryan. So there's action in Congress, there's ferment in Congress, there's proposal in Congress, but we need the action to be quicker, and we need Nancy Pelosi to get out of the way, as we have needed her to get out of the way of so many other things. The present situation was recognized in an article by Heather Long in the Washington Post, who said that we Americans are very likely to get 1,000 or more in checks. And she wanted us to know a few things. We've already gone over most of those things. She says job losses are mounting and could reach the millions. She points out 1,000 isn't going to fully compensate people, but experts and politicians say it's a good first step to help people buy groceries and pay rent. Well, the rent part of that is certainly right, and since that would probably take the whole $1,000 payment, they won't have any money to buy any groceries, but it turns out there are some things they usually buy at the grocery store, like toilet paper and tissues. There also seems to be a shortage of low-fat cottage cheese in the market. I can tell you about those things because I tried to buy them today. I got a little bit of low-fat cottage cheese, but it was overpriced. So, of course, not to be outdone by Nancy Pelosi, the article points out, there are lots of questions about doling out money so freely. Some ask whether it's wise to send money at a time when most Americans are supposed to stay home to prevent the spread of the virus. Others argue that rich people shouldn't get checks because they do not need the cash. Well, of course, we've already answered that earlier. This goes over some of the ground we've now already gone over. Something new came from Josh Hawley. He would give families with children about $1,500 more for every month the national emergency continues. The payments would be sent to single parents earning up to $50,000 and married parents earning up to $100,000. I think they should give single parents more because they need more. Like, mainly it should go up to $75,000 for single parents instead of having a limit of $50,000 for a single parent. I mean, why would a single parent be richer than two parents who are earning up to $100,000? Answer: she wouldn't be. Yeah, most of the time it's a she, right? We will need multiple rounds of money for everyone, said Claudia Sahm, a former Federal Reserve economist who's one of the leading experts on recessions. Quote, this recession is going to be more severe than the Great Recession. That, of course, was the recession of 2007 to 2009, Well, I think it lasted a lot longer than that, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't we? Maybe the crash happened from 2007 to 2009, but seemed to me technically we were still in a recession up until 2011, and it still felt like we were in a depression right up close to 2016. And for many people, it has always felt like a recession. But she said it might not last as long if policymakers act very boldly. There were lonely people saying similar things in 2008 and 2009, like the MMT economists and like myself, before I even glommed on to MMT. Anyway, she's been talking to lawmakers about a $1.5 trillion stimulus that would include these checks along with aid for states and help for companies on the verge of bankruptcy. That sounds much more similar to Bernie's plan than he does. I noticed in this article, which originally appeared in the Post, there was no mention of Bernie's plan. No mention of Bernie's plan. Of course, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil is again the policy of the mainstream with respect to Bernie Sanders. If Bernie continues to run, they're probably just going to ignore him as if he's not there and Joe Biden is already the nominee. Anyway, Claudia Sahm wants to give a lot of people direct money and also money to businesses and to put together a pretty strong bailout, though, as we've noted already, not as strong as the one Bernie Sanders proposes, nowhere near as strong as that. Common Dreams had an article on Pelosi. When she told people about her troubles involving the need to means test these payments, there was this tweet from activist Jordan Bayul, who said, quote, I truly don't know how to describe how maddening it is that Republicans and Trump officials are to the left of the congressional Democratic leadership on this issue. He said, absolutely fucking maddening, he tweeted. And he didn't use any bleeps either. He spelled it out. Direct cash payments would be a salve to the gaping wound left in the U.S. economy by the pandemic and by the president, who refused to recognize it until just about this week. The man who called it fake news. The man who recently said it was okay, it was just going to be a minor thing. Just going to be a minor thing. We had an increase in new cases yesterday by something like 40%. That is, our total cases increased by 40% in one day. Quote, we are the wealthiest nation in human history and have the lowest borrowing costs of any major government on the planet, and thus can easily afford to contain the pandemic and keep our people well provisioned simultaneously. That was a quote in New York Magazine from Eric Eric Levitz, who in saying that was reflecting the conventional wisdom. But he said, quote, all we need is for Congress to overcome its superstitions about deficits and supply the economy with the many trillions of dollars in stimulus that even many center-right economists say we need, unquote. And just as Congress needs to overcome its superstitions about having deficits, I think Levitz has to overcome his superstition about not directly creating money without issuing debt instruments. In other words, Congress is not the only one with superstitions. And Levitz needs to get over his own as well. As the Congress has deepened, the political ground on cash payments has shifted substantially with bipartisan congressional support for the proposal. We've already been over the support for that, so I'm not going to repeat that. Note the following quote, though, from Zach Carter of Huffington Post. Said Nancy Pelosi is officially to the right of Tom Cotton on economic support for American families. Tweeted this on Sunday. This is a total failure of Democratic Party leadership. Certainly is. A new consensus president, Shoikat Chakrabarti, who used to be, if you recall, the chief of staff for AOC, but who now is the new consensus president. He was flabbergasted at Pelosi's resistance to payments for all Americans. I'll bet he was flabbergasted, right? I'll bet he found it a big surprise, right? Quote, he said, this crazy obsession in Dem leadership with looking, quote, reasonable, unquote, by not, quote, doing too much, unquote, is about as impractical and insane as you can get in the face of a pandemic, he tweeted. He should have added, in the face of a pandemic in an election year. Because if the moral issue doesn't move Pelosi, if she doesn't care about the people who are going to suffer economic hardships to help them to die, then at least she should care about the fact that many of them will survive to vote against her beloved centrist Democrats in the fall. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, a candidate for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, has proposed a $2 trillion package. Oh, come in dreams, caught that, including direct payments to American journalists, to Americans. Journalist Walker Bragman on Wednesday noted the absurdity of Trump being closer to Sanders on relief than the Democratic leadership is to Sanders. Quote, Trump, who bungled the early response to coronavirus, is starting to take actions resembling Bernie Sanders' proposals, monthly checks, ramping up the production via the Defense the Defense Production Act, freezing foreclosures and evictions, all while Dems push things like tax rebates, Walker Bragman said, and he added, baffling. This is baffling. It's not baffling. It's covered by the observations out of touch, stupid, and passing their sell-by date. Pelosi and Schumer and the rest of the Democratic leadership needs to resign and give other people a chance. Right now, they need to resign. They're a disgrace. They're a disgrace. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. They are a disgrace. Meanwhile, the GOP intelligence chair, the Republican intelligence chair in the House, unloaded personal stocks before COVID-19 smashed the markets. Insider trading, gross insider trading. I don't think that's against the law for a congressman, by the way. That's one of the loopholes in the law that allows obvious corruption to go on in the Congress. And that's exactly what Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Senator Richard Byrd is, an insider trader. He could have easily been warned by some of his big dollar donors about the looming threat of the coronavirus. His personal stock holdings were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, many of them in industries now seriously impacted by the outbreak. According to Open Secrets, Burr and his wife, whose name is Brooke, get it? Brooke Burr, sold between $581,000 and $1.5 million in publicly traded stocks on February 13th and didn't buy any new positions, according to a recent financial disclosure filed with the Senate. Insider trading, people. Insider trading. Front-end corruption. And Byrd, by the way, said this crisis, this pandemic, is much more aggressive in its transmission than anything we have seen in recent history, he said. It's probably more akin to the 1918 pandemic, he added, referring to the flu virus, which killed more than 600,000 Americans. At the time, in 1918, if I'm not mistaken, the population of the United States was probably around maybe 90 million or 100 million, let's say 100 million. And let us underestimate and say, or note that our population is now 330 million. Let us round that off to 3 times the fatalities if this is like the Spanish flu pandemic. In other words, instead of killing 600,000 Americans, now he's saying there's a possibility it's going to kill but 2 million Americans. That's what he's saying. Of course, a report that was issued by a modeling organization in the UK just yesterday said that it very well might kill 2.2 billion Americans if nothing was done. It's amazing how these estimates are starting to converge. And a few weeks ago, off some information that I got from John Campbell, I was estimating on my show that even if only 50% of us were infected by the virus, and the fatality rates of that time, which were roughly 2%, held true, I estimated that we would lose 3.3 million Americans. So the numbers we're talking about here are in the millions. And we really need to recognize that. And apropos of that, Senator Ron Johnson today came out with the notion, the idea, yes, this is going to be a very, very serious virus, but after all, it's not going to threaten our nation much because we lose an awful lot of people per year just in the normal course of events to auto crashes. And we've had other serious pandemics or epidemics or incidents where we've lost hundreds of thousands of lives, and wars where we've lost hundreds of thousands, of lives. And we have weathered those, and we have survived. So yes, this is serious, but it's comparable to these other things we've had happen to us over the years. So people should know we're going to come out of this. So the senator, of course, was criticized for trying to normalize this. One, Jonathan Chait, who writes for New York Magazine, I believe, and who's a rabid Clintonite, or was a rabid Clintonite, criticized Senator Johnson, saying this is not comparable to fatalities from auto accidents, annual fatalities for auto accidents. 37,000 fatalities is not comparable to the very large numbers we would get if the predictions about the coronavirus are right. He failed, of course, to do the arithmetic, about the coronavirus. So he couldn't compare the 37,000 fatalities that were cited by Johnson to 2.2 million fatalities, or 3.3 million fatalities that are likely result if we don't clamp down hard and do something about the coronavirus. At this point, do whatever needs to be done about it. And so he didn't say anything about the number. He didn't say that it was going to be 3.3 million. He said, it might be 1,000 times more serious than the fatalities due to auto accidents. And he said, well, we might not be that concerned of auto accidents. We might be concerned about something 1,000 times serious. And he was right about that. But he should have multiplied out that 1,000 times and pointed out that 3.7 million fatalities are unlikely to be acceptable to the American people. Now, someone else who does not believe in arithmetic, the TYT commentator, John Iadarola, who I frequently like very much, also showed the same degree, of laziness while being more explicit about it, than Jonathan Chait. He too was too lazy to do the arithmetic and come up with a figure like 2.2 million or 3.3 million and directly compare that to the 37,000. Why are people so allergic to numbers? What's wrong with numbers? Why do they have to use qualitative terms that can be so misleading? I have no idea. I have no idea why. So word comes to me from Lana that Jim Clyburn has said to Joe Biden that Joe Biden should adopt Bernie Sanders' programs. I'd like to ask Jim Clyburn a question. Hey, Jim, what's the use if Joe Biden adopts Bernie Sanders' programs to run on, when, if he gets into office, he's not going to try to pass those programs anyway? If he adopts the program for purposes of the campaign, that absolutely doesn't mean he's going to push them when and if he gets into the White House. Who would believe he's going to push them? He's the man who on 7 different occasions tried to cut Social Security. He's the man who refused to advocate for stopping fracking or the use of fossil fuels. He's the man who just recently said if a Medicare for All bill came to his desk, he would veto it. Jim, what do we care whether Joe Biden endorses Bernie's programs or not? What's that going to mean to us? We're not going to believe him anyway. He's got to do something more concrete than that. What I would recommend is that he get out of the race tomorrow and leave Bernie Sanders as the only surviving candidate who can become the nominee of the Democratic Party, because Bernie Sanders is the only person we can trust to fight this through and get it passed in the Congress. And we all know that. You're not going to fool us by having Joe Biden run on Bernie Sanders' platform. That's not going to do any good. That's not going to happen. Nor is Joe Biden going to get elected, because not enough of us progressives are going to vote for him because we don't trust him. And why should we? Why should we? So now finally we come to the race. Of course, well, I should say, finally we come to the Congress. What I recommend, I shouldn't say finally we come to the Congress, because then we're going to come to the race a little bit. But coming to the Congress first, if the Congress does not pass a thoroughly satisfactory recovery program from the virus, which is along the lines that Bernie Sanders has proposed, my suggestion is that we vote against whoever supports an inadequate program, okay, an inadequate agenda, Republican or Democrat. I suggest we call our senators, we call our congressperson, and we say, if you won't pass the Bernie Sanders recovery plan on his campaign site, then we, or I, as the case may be, are going to vote for your opponent this coming fall. Because make no mistake, this time you've got to vote for what we need and what we want, and not what your damn donors need. That's what we need to tell them. And by the way, what we need to tell Bernie in the coming days is that we want him to stay in the race, come what may, okay, until the convention. Don't let anybody push him out. Let him be our voice during this time of crisis as long as possible, and if possible, right up to Election Day. Let him continue to be the voice of the movement. Let's make no mistake, this movement is us. He told us, not me, us. We have to recognize the movement is us. And we want to be heard right up through Election Day. Not even just up through the convention, right up through Election Day. That's what has to happen. Now let's get to the campaign news. Tulsi Gabbard today dropped out of the campaign and made a statement in which she expressed her love for Bernie Sanders and for Jane, okay, and for Nina Turner. And also, in that statement, she indicated that she was endorsing Joe Biden because she thought that he was a very decent person and had a very good heart. And she knew that because she knew the Biden family, because she had become a good friend, okay, of Beau Biden's when they served in the reserve together. And she knew that Joe Biden was really a good person, okay, who had a good heart. Well, I say to her, and I say to all of us, it is not enough to have a good heart. You have to do the good things. And you can't do bad things, like attempt to cut Social Security on 7 different occasions, okay, in your career. Like not writing and pushing and being instrumental in passing a crime bill that imprisoned so many people needlessly. Like not voting for the Clinton bills that stripped us of Glass-Steagall, okay, and that allowed the creation of these new financial instruments that put the whole financial system at risk, like not voting for and not supporting and not mobilizing support for the war in Iraq. And like not selling out to the pharmaceutical companies for all these years. And not selling out to the credit card companies and the financial interests for all these years. And not just a few weeks ago expressing your opposition to Medicare for all. Okay, and also saying that if a Medicare for all bill came to your desk, you would veto it. you would veto it. There are implications of Tulsi's endorsement. Some people have been saying that, oh, there's that damn Chromacam thing on there again. Sorry, folks. Okay, I want to adjust that. That's not what, okay, I should be using. Oh, I see. I'm not using that. I just had to refresh my page, which I just did. Okay, that's good. My page had frozen. Okay. Okay, let me refresh the page before I go over. I'm still not sure that everything is all right. I'm now looking at the Facebook feed itself, which I hadn't been looking at for some time.
My page had frozen.
Okay, so anyway, here we are. Okay, once again. News also broke, or
Okay, let me refresh the page before I go.
there were rumors, okay, that started. Okay, and the rumors were that the first thing Tulsi did was not to endorse Joe Biden, but to approach Bernie Sanders and ask him, okay, if, to tell him that she would like to endorse him. She was dropping out of the campaign. She wanted to endorse him. And would he like her to endorse him? And supposedly Bernie replied and said that he refused her endorsement. Okay, and the implication was that somehow he refused her endorsement.
We haven't heard anything.
Okay, now we don't know whether that's true or not. Something else might have happened which squares with the actual facts, but which has an entirely different meaning. It could be, but also an alarming meaning for us. It could be that Tulsi approached him, concerning an endorsement. He said, well, Tulsi, it wouldn't be right for me to accept an endorsement from you now because it's very possible that I'll be dropping out of the campaign action myself, in a week or so. Now, Bernie's told us he's going through an assessment of his campaign, but right now, and is talking to his supporters. So, of course, that has an implication that he might consider a number of different alternatives. Now, I'm on record as saying that I think that Bernie should run a parallel campaign to Joe Biden's, certainly right up to the convention, and not drop out of the race. Make the Democrats select Joe Biden if they're going to select him in July. But take the time to campaign and push the positions that are most likely to save us from the virus, to heal the economy as quickly as possible, and get some other policies which will help us to run and replace Trump in the fall, and then see who the Democratic Party really wants to nominate. Because who knows? It's only the end of March. There's April, May, and June to go. A lot can happen in April, May, and June. An awful lot can happen, especially with Joe Biden. If Joe Biden has to run a campaign of another 3 or 4 months, then people might see that he is not in the shape he needs to be to handle the job as president. Now, we are pretty sure that this is true. We're pretty sure that this is true. The reason why I was gesturing, at Bonnie, as you just are seeing on your screen, is because she was nervously playing with the internet cable.
No, I wasn't.
Yes, you are. You were fingering the internet cable while you were sitting there. That's why I did that. So Bonnie says Nancy Pelosi has been rich for too long. Put her in a young single mother's position and ask
How she would advise her.
how she would advise her to be hopeful about the present situation. Okay, so my proposal was that he run a parallel campaign. I think that's what he should do. I still think that's what he should do. I think, that it's the logical thing to do because we still need him to head this movement. And when he no longer wants to head this movement, the not me, us movement, the collective movement of the progressive left, then he should retire as the movement head in an orderly way. With a process that leads us to somebody who can carry on the agenda. Hello, somebody.
Hello.
We need that. Lana Dell says, what do I mean, a parallel campaign? I mean, continue his campaign for the presidency, running on his own progressive agenda.
He's done virtual.
He's a candidate for the presidency, for the Democratic Party nomination. Let him remain a candidate for the party nomination. Let him carry it through to the end. Let everybody have a chance to vote. Let the party have a chance to see whether Joe Biden can stand the gaffe of being the president of the United States. If he can't stand the gaffe of carrying this campaign out to the end, he certainly can't stand being the U.S. president for 4 years. We need a president who's going to be surviving for 4 years, who's going to be vigorous for 4 years, who's going to be meeting the climate crisis for 4 years. Of course, I'm assuming that the coronavirus crisis will be beaten by the end of this year. I hope so. I certainly hope there's going to be a vaccine by the end of the year or by the beginning of 2021, so that he'll be able to turn his attention to the climate emergency. We need that. We need that. We need that kind of campaign. I would even say that after the party makes its particular decision, that if he then wants to withdraw from leadership, of our movement, which is basically what he has now, he should do so in an orderly way and direct his attention to doing that and to continuing to give life to the movement, and not take his campaign, but take his energy to campaign for someone who's not going to work for a progressive agenda, who's only going to work to defeat Trump so he can go back to a series of patchwork policies trying to take us back to the Obama past, which was not good for any of us in the first place. We don't want any of that. We don't want to vote for someone who's going to do that. And we don't want Bernie to campaign for anybody who's going to do that. I mean, devil take the hindmost with the promises he made. The promises he made assumed a fair campaign. But we know all the evidence that exists for machine rigging of this campaign, for voter suppression in this particular campaign. There was cheating all across the board. All the establishment people who were supposed to be neutral plotted to line up behind Biden in a way that would stampede the primary to Biden. What was fair about that?
He didn't campaign at all.
Bernie never had a fair primary. He didn't have one in 2016, and he didn't have one this time. And it's not simply about Bernie having a fair primary. We did not have a fair primary because it was our primary as much as it was Bernie's. It was about us, not just about Bernie. They cheated us. Okay, my wife and I have contributed a considerable amount to Bernie, as much as we could afford, over the two campaigns. We contributed another $27 today and another small contribution of $2.70 today. We did that. When we knew he was considering bowing out, we still did that. We still did that. Why did we do that? Why did we do that? We did that because this was our campaign and not just his. He ran on that basis. And we want him to honor his implicit promise to us that this was our campaign and not just his. And that excludes the possibility that he will accept whatever decision the Democratic Party makes. And it includes the possibility that he run on a third-party ticket himself for the remainder of this campaign. And if he then wants to retire, he no longer wants to leave the movement forward, then he should participate in bringing new leaders of the movement to the fore who can succeed him and who can be as compelling, as innovative, as charismatic as he has been. He has to end this in an orderly way. He can't just go back to the Senate and take his chairmanship there. That's not good enough for us. I will now consider your comments. I hope you liked this stream. If you did, please share, like, and subscribe the YouTube when it goes up within 20 minutes of this broadcast. And please also go to my Patreon page at patreon.com /Joe_Firestone. And occasionally make a contribution, because I, just like everybody else during this kind of thing, needs some monthly support. I do need some monthly support. Just like all the rest of us. Anyway, please share, like, and subscribe. Okay, so Steve Wolfbrand says, shit, governor just put California on lockdown. National Guard to guard the food banks. Well, that's probably a good idea. I mean, it's not, actually martial law, It's just, using the National Guard to help staff the place and keep order. Okay, as Evelina says nope, and George Scheller says that he agrees. Steve Wolfbrand says Bernie should stay in because Biden's dementia is getting worse every week. Kay says, yes, I hope Bernie can hang in there. Well, Bernie will hang in there if we all communicate with him and we all encourage him and we all tell him we need him to hang in there and keep hanging in there and not go away. If he doesn't go away, we won't go away. We'll continue to financially support him and support him at rallies and support him in movement activities while the campaign is going on. And that may finally convince the Democratic Party to back off and take the candidate that they need to take in order to win. Evelina says, too many pushy people in the wrong places. Leave us and Bernie be what we may up to Election Day. George Scheller says, he's running on our dime. He is. Steve DeVore says, as far as I'm concerned, Bernie's race is far from over. He has a country to save. Stacy says, but Joe Biden is a Catholic POS. Well, POS stands for
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I don't think I share that particular sentiment. I mean, I share the POS part. George says, he's so good, he voted for the Iraq War. Yeah, he's so good, he voted for the Iraq War, right? He has such a good heart. He voted to kill millions of Iraqis.
Kelsey can put up with it.
Steve DeVore says, and we need to tell him what's on the line for you. Evelina said, must have been heartbroken over that. Stacy says, like Clarence Dumbhead Thomas and the Hyde goddamn amendment. Thank you, Stacy. I knew I forgot a few things. Like Clarence Dumbhead Thomas and the crucifixion of Anita Hill. I remember that well because he wouldn't allow the other witnesses to testify. Wouldn't allow the other witnesses to testify. He sold her out.
Yes, he did.
Steve says, Biden lies more than Trump. I wouldn't say that, Steve. I mean, he did only lie, what was it, 6 times during the debate on Sunday? If he really lied as much as Trump, he probably would have lied 15 times during the debate. Sean Anthony Connor says, I think we need to send a petition, Kate, to DNC saying we will not support Biden in the general. We need 500K to 1 million people to sign it. It should be hand delivered and filmed. Oh, you mean we should film all 1 million people signing it? I think to get that done, we'd have to have all 1 million people come to Milwaukee and sign it in Milwaukee while the Democratic convention is going on. Steve DeVore says 2 peas in a pod. Which are the peas and which are the pod? Of course, I failed to mention, okay, another possibility of why Tulsi actually endorsed Biden. I don't really believe this is true, but this is a possibility. She may have endorsed Biden because Biden has committed to having a woman of color as the vice president of the United States. And let's not forget, Tulsi fits that formula. Tulsi fits. Maybe Biden promised her the vice presidency of the United States in return for an endorsement. Why would he want her as the vice president? He might want her as the vice president because, as she said, she's a friend of the family. And she was a good friend, of Beau. She might even be a good friend of Jill's. I don't know. Just raising a possibility. Lana says, Bush, only those who filed a tax return, I think. She was answering Stephen Wolfbrandt. Kay says, they keep saying dementia. Joe will unite the part nation, laugh out loud. How stupid is that? Might as well hand the orange idiot, another term. Oh, I wouldn't go that far. When we weigh the orange idiot, we really have to worry about things like, for example, Brazil, Bolsonaro support, Venezuela, the actions of the American intelligence agencies in Bolivia recently, support for the regime in Chile. The reactionary policies of the United States in Latin American countries and in South American countries. I mean, Trump is carrying out the most reactionary policies in our hemisphere. Now, Biden might continue those. I agree. He might continue those. But he might ease off them. There's a possibility. He might just be more friendly to people there. I don't know. I'm just saying. In any case, it's Trump who's the terror down there. And it's Trump who ought to be punished for it. And what about Iran? Biden is likely to restore relations with Iran and try to reinstate the deal made by the Obama administration with them. And Iran really needs a deal now. Trump is continuing to apply these horrific economic sanctions. I mean, it's incredible. Now I know Biden's going to follow bad policies too. I hesitate to think what he's going to do in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East. He probably won't be as relatively, shall I say, pacifist even, in Eastern Europe as Trump has been. But he'll probably be just as bad. He'll probably be just as bad when it comes to Israel and Saudi. But he won't be any worse than Trump. So there are foreign policy stakes here too. And I'm not sure that Trump is not a heck of a lot worse. On the other hand, on the third hand, to keep talking about this, Joe Biden is still a crazy free trade advocate for treaties like the TPP, the TTIP, and the TISA. And he wanted ISDS clauses protecting the big corporations and all of them. At least Trump was against that and got the ISDS clauses taken out of those particular treaties. He marginally improved the new treaties that he has going with other states. So it seems to me, on balance, that there's maybe a little bit of advantage to Biden in the foreign policy field. But the foreign policy field is so important. We cannot have another war now if we're going to face the climate emergency. We cannot. We have to begin to withdraw. And we have to begin to take care of the critical business that we have to take care of here. We have to reconstruct a whole society. And Biden would at least be a lot more open to pressure than Trump has been. And George Chella says a lot has already happened here since Super Tuesday. Lana asked about the parallel campaigns, and I talked about that. And Kay says half of the country is not even voted yet. People might change their minds, Kay, with the mess we're in now. I think we now passed the halfway mark. Joe Biden has something like 1,147 delegates. Bernie Sanders has something like, what was it? 800 and take 286 delegates away from 847. What is it? Let me double check this as long as I've got it up here. The last delegate counts I saw were something like, where is that? It should be here. Anyway, I gave the figure last night. I think we're over 1,900 delegates, which is something like the 50% mark. Now, I guess it's 1,999, okay, for majority. So they're just short of 4,000. They are close to the 2,000 mark in terms of distribution, okay, of the delegates now. It's very, very close. I guess it's still a good approximation to say. It's 1,147 for Biden, 861 for Sanders. Bernie is 286 delegates, okay, behind. What's 1,147 and 861? Okay, it seems to me that's I think that's over 2,000 delegates, folks. So I think we're past the halfway mark, technically speaking, anyway. But halfway is a good approximation. So okay, Evelina says different countries are looking for a vaccine right now. Yet another race. And George Scheller says to Evelina, I bet Cuba finds it first. Yeah, Cuba might find it first. Their antiviral drug that they actually got for another purpose, okay? They developed it in 1981, okay, I believe. okay, if I recall correctly. And it was used in China to treat the coronavirus in China, and used successfully there, and has helped them to get to the point where they have no new cases now. And where they have, I think they have no new fatalities now as well. I may be mistaken, okay, about that. But I guess for the first time, there were no new fatalities actually reported today. I think I got that right. Anyway, you can double check it. And Steve Day says, hi, here's Steve Grumbine tonight. Re the Gabbard dropout endorsement. Yeah, Steve is going to put the correct spin on it, that she's a neoliberal and that she never understood economics anyway, and she doesn't actually differ with Joe Biden too much, but when it comes to economics. And so that's why she endorsed him. He's probably going to say something like that. Steve always objected to Tulsi based on the idea that, she didn't really understand the economics of what was going on. I always thought that if Bernie won, the nomination, and he asked her to be his vice president, that she would very quickly get educated by Stephanie before the campaign got too much older than that. So I wasn't too worried about her. I had faith in Stephanie's ability to persuade her to the truths, of MMT. And my daughters commented, 5 more Italian doctors have died trying to treat the virus. Lana says, I agree, it's our primary. They don't care, though. Well, maybe we can show them that it was our primary by making sure they don't win this fall. Devorah said, no one got a fair primary. Lots of people's money, time, blood, sweat, and tears were wasted on all sides. And Kathy said, my son and I contributed for his 2 campaigns as well. I hope he's not going to disappoint us. Steve Day says, hit up Tom Perez. And Evelina says, punch him. Steve Day says, a burn run non-dem has to go with an existing party at this stage. Yeah, so it probably has to be the Green Party, okay, or is the Progressive Party an existing party? And if so, in how many states have they got a ballot line on? He might have to run as the candidate of the Working Families Party. Perhaps the Working Families Party has enough states with a ballot line that he could win. Okay, and Lana said he shouldn't campaign for Biden either. That will make me puke. Devorah says, I know. Stephen Day said there's available an MSN piece from 2016 spelling out the write-in rules. Google the subject or PM me. Okay, thanks, Steve. Steve Day. Russ says, person of sensibilities? Nah. And Lana says, but do you think he should call out the vote rigging? But Tim Canova said that with Jimmy Dore that he should. Yes, I think he should. I mean, I think he should have called out the vote rigging in Iowa. He should have taken legal action in Iowa to force them to produce the paper ballots, or at least the actual votes of the precincts. in the Caucasus. He should have asked them to produce the paper ballots in New Hampshire. We would have backed him. We would have paid the legal costs for it all. If he had followed a policy of letting the Democratic Party know that he was going to challenge in every state to get to see the paper ballots, they would have been a lot more careful about cheating, a lot more careful. Most of the states have paper records of some sort or other. He should have started the campaign entirely lawyered up and delivered shots across their bow from the first primary on, making it very clear to them it was going to be a total legal mess if they didn't run fair primaries. That's the way to ensure a fair primary. Russ says, I don't get why Bernie is such a reluctant revolutionary. Well, I don't think he's reluctant when it comes to policy programs. I don't think that he's a reluctant revolutionary when it comes to enlisting people to support him. He is a reluctant revolutionary, though, when it comes to fighting with people, fighting with personalities for things, with personalities that he has some relationship with. He's lived his life so he could get things done in Congress, developing personal relationships with other people in the Congress and with other people in the Senate. And he feels uncomfortable being angry with those people. Okay, and Eric Ewald says, pretend you don't see the comment. I'm gonna laugh out loud. Steve Day says, we are not radicals. And Steve Day says Tulsi, is colored. She's a person, of color. Her family came from Samoa. She's partly Polynesian, I think. In terms of the origin of the family, and partly Indian, I believe too. If I'm not mistaken. Certainly, is Hindu. And her convictions, her religious convictions. Anyway, I can't completely remember the background, but I remember that she is partly Polynesian. Stacy says, the plot thickens to keep her quiet, and obsequious. And Steve says, but Steve Wolfbrand says, Tulsi is Polynesian. Yes, she is. And Steve Day says, elbow rubbing, Gabbard Biden. And Steve Day says, piddly orange checks for us. Stacy says, how are the reactionary policies in California? In California and SA, and South America, so different from the Dem programs. Well, they're different in aggressiveness, certainly, in South America. The Obama administration never instituted such cruel sanctions on Venezuela. I shouldn't say California. CA is Central America and South America of Trump. So different. They're different from the Obama policy stances. I doubt okay, that Obama would have tried to overthrow the government in the recent coup, okay, in Bolivia. I don't think the Obama administration would have tried to do that. Kay says, 0 Hour just had a post about why can the rich get tested for the virus while others can't. It was a good discussion. Yeah, one reason why Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson were able to get tested, found they had the virus, and were quickly treated was because they have a home in Australia. Since they have a home in Australia, they were eligible for the Australian form, okay, of Medicare for All.
Yeah.
So they just walked in and got the test. Guess what? And then they were treated, and now they've been sent home, okay, it's been announced, and are under self-quarantine. Evelina says, foreign policy, okay, is a big deal to me. Well, but don't get me wrong. We'll be complaining a lot about Joe Biden's foreign policy, and justifiably so. And let's hope he's had enough of wars in the Middle East, because we've had it up to here with wars in the Middle East. Okay. But by and large, his foreign policy is likely to be not, I don't know. I hesitate to even say it because they both are fairly likely to do something dangerous. But I somehow have the feeling that Biden will not try to do things that are consciously dangerous, that when people warn him that something is dangerous, that he at least will listen twice to it. I have a feeling about that. Maybe that's why Tulsi endorsed him, okay, in the end. In other words, maybe she thought that Bernie was done, that Trump was very dangerous, okay, because of the regime change wars, and maybe she thought that Biden had had enough of the regime change wars. After all, Beau Biden died because of the after effects of his service in the Iraq War. And Evelina says, thank you for your good energy. Sleep well. Steve Day says, I am colorblind and proud of it. Kay says, thank you, Evelina. And Steve says, good night. Sleep well. And Steve says, Tulsi as Biden's VP might be interesting. She would become a president in short order as Biden's mind turns to mush. Yeah, that's a possibility. I think she wouldn't have any regime change wars. Her foreign policy would certainly be better. And also, she would do something about the climate emergency. She might not do the Green New Deal. And Steve Grumbine is probably right. She probably wouldn't be learning any MMT anytime soon. So she probably wouldn't be great from the standpoint, okay, of inequality. But Steve Day says, put Howie Hawkins and Bernie in touch. And he says the Working Families Party went with Warren for a while. I know they did, but Warren has dropped out and is no longer a candidate. And a lot of the people in the Working Families Party wanted to endorse Bernie in the first place. Steve Day says, so Working Families Party does have more status, okay, than the Tea Party. I thought both were just using the word party. No, the Working Families Party is a regular party. They've been prominent, okay, in New York State. They are a third party, okay, in New York State. They endorse candidates. They run candidates. And they gave their endorsement, okay, in this year to Warren over Sanders because their leaders were in favor, okay, of Warren. But I believe the membership was in favor, okay, of Bernie. The reason why I believe this was 4 years ago, they released the vote, okay, of their members, and they showed then that their voters, their members had voted for Bernie Sanders by a majority vote. This year, they refused to release the vote of their members. All they did was announce that the selection of the party, okay, was Warren. So I think what happened was that their leaders simply overrode the majority, okay, of their members. Stacy says, feel uncomfortable about being angry with those people. How, when they constantly denigrate him as an angry old coot? But Bernie, if you want to talk about somebody having a good heart, that's Bernie. He has a rough exterior in many situations, okay, and in many ways. But he is a person who thinks well of other people and who gets to like them and who gets to trust them, even when they betray him time after time after time. What in translation in Spanish dreadful, calling a political party a fiesta. Stephen Day says, party on. Must be on purpose, laugh out loud. Do I really think Biden will beat Trump? I just don't think so. No, I don't think that he's going to beat Trump. He'll probably fall apart during the campaign, and Trump will most probably win. Lana says, Bo died of brain cancer, didn't he? Yes. I think the cancer appeared as a result of his activities in Iraq. I think it was even traced to the after effects of some conditions that he encountered there. Evelina Pont, no irony, too much to ask for from the auto translator. And Russ says, maybe Trump will mint the coin soon. Well, if he does mint the coin, he won't be able to spend that money until Congress appropriates it. And Evelina says, wish you luck, enjoy. Steve Day says, thanks for great info on the Working Families Party. I will post with them. Lana says it was a very sad funeral. Yeah, I think Bo was very popular with people. And people really thought that he would make a very successful politician. And maybe people also thought that he had a lot more principle than his father or his brother. I think Tulsi did. That's probably why she was friends with him. Stacey Van Veen said, burn pits depleted by uranium shells. So he died as an after effect of coming into contact with the after effects of our destructive activities in Iraq. So Joe Biden indirectly killed his own son. And I think Bo was his favorite son. Anyway, I've now considered and replied to all of your comments, I think. I don't think I missed one. I tried not to miss one. Anyway, we have to keep on fighting. And that's what my message is tonight. So keep on fighting. And I've been on for close to 2 hours, not quite 2 hours. So I think it's time for me to say good night. Good night to you. Today is Thursday night. So I won't be with you tomorrow. The next time I see you will be Saturday. On Saturday, I have an MMT program coming up. But Jeff Epstein will be here, and he is going to interview me about MMT. He's going to ask me a set of questions on MMT. I don't know what they're going to be yet, but I'm sure he'll have a very interesting set of questions for me. He had an interview with me earlier in 2019, and he recently published some of the videos from that interview on Citizens Media TV on YouTube, and the video has been circulating recently. So now he's coming back for a return engagement, and we will have that on Saturday night at 9 p.m. Steve DeVore says, I learned MMT from Jeff Epstein. Okay, good for Jeff. And Lana says, I hope you two are going to put up an announcement that we can invite people to. Yes, we will. We're going to announce it ahead of time in some way. We'll go over the topic and we will announce it. And you'll have a good deal of time to promote it. Much more time than you get to promote most of my live streams, because I never decide what they're going to be on, okay, until about a half hour before the program. Sorry. I'm going through so much different news. I haven't been live streaming much, okay, on MMT. I've written 7 books that are related to the subject, so I know a lot about it. But I really wanted to make this in-depth program, okay, a politics program, which is certainly favorable to MMT, and occasionally talking about MMT, but I didn't want the MMT issues to dominate this in-depth program about the politics and progressive politics to boot. So, good night. Okay, good night. Please share this, even more than you've already done. But thank you for the shares thus far. And I'll be seeing you Saturday. Thank you, Steve Day. I appreciate that. Last remark. I'm going to end the stream now. Thank you.